Why are people suddenly comparing Starfield to Cyberpunk? Well, in the wake of Phantom Liberty, we are seeing a lot of comparisons just between the NPC behavior as well as the world, the graphics, just how alive the environments feel when you're in like a town or just moving through an area. And I myself never really got hooked by Cyberpunk and was recently sort of pulled in with Phantom Liberty, and I'm really enjoying my time. And the more I play it, the more I really get the sense that they are doing NPC interactions, dialogue, and sort of dynamic situations where they're moving and saying different things. I think they're doing it better than I've really ever seen before. And I've always wanted to love Cyberpunk. I've always wanted to enjoy the game. And I joked with Captain Steve the other day when he was in my stream, and I said, oh, you should make a video comparing the NPCs and I'll react to it. And he did. He made a video, and I thought, well, let me react to this because I keep drawing the comparisons in my mind, and I wanted to see what somebody else thought when they sort of put these up against other NPCs. Now, he also is going to draw comparisons with No Man's Sky. Not surprising, right? It's Captain Steve. So let's take a look and see what he says here and see what we think when we compare. Essentially, what I'm looking for is Cyberpunk versus Starfield, because we know that Starfield and Cyberpunk have very, very similar interactions with when you go and talk to NPCs. Let's see how he shakes this one out. Make sure and support the original video. It'll be linked below, and support his channel. He stops by every once in a while when I'm streaming. Nice guy. We have to have him on a show sometime and do a show maybe about this very thing.
Well, how do there, chums? 'Tis I, Captain of the Steves, and today, chums, I want to compare three games that I love to bits when it comes to NPCs, NPC interactions, how memorable they are, and how in-depth they are. And the three games that I'm going to compare is Starfield, No Man's Sky, and Cyberpunk.
Just quickly want to point out, he did say he loves these games to bits, so I don't think this video is intended to be hate or anything like that. I know a lot of people like to hate on Starfield and bash it. I did a video recently saying they could learn from Phantom Liberty and push for like a 2.0 moment. I would love for Starfield to have a turnaround because I just don't think it landed in the way that a lot of us were hoping for or expecting. But he's enjoying it. He's saying he loves these games to bits. So the comparison here is just to say which one does he feel, is doing the best job.
And because out of those three, Starfield is the newer game, that's the one that I really want to sort of pass judgment on. I know that might sound a little bit odd to pass judgment on, but just to show comparison on, judgment could be a little bit too harsh. Anyway, let's jump on over into the verse so I can show you what I'm on about. So these are videos that I have created for all three of the games. I'm just going to show you snippets of each of them and the interactions with the NPCs. So here you go. This is No Man's Sky, and I'm interacting with a Gek here. He's a little alien Gek on a little Gecky alien world inside of a space game. So interacting with a space alien inside of a space game seems quite apt. Here we go. I would like a word, please. Thank you. Teach me your language. Okay, so here you go. This is what I mean. Look, there's four here. There's four. Once we've learnt a few words, this will drop down to 3, then 2, then 1, and then we've learnt the language. So it always excites me when 1 disappears from that tier. Let's run around this and let's see if that actually happens, people. We'll see if it goes down to 3.
Now, I'm just going to point out, I've always felt that the character design and the NPCs in No Man's Sky were great. I think they're fitting for the game. I do think No Man's Sky leans away from having what you would consider to be like really top shelf NPC interactions. They just sort of do their job, but I think that's okay. I don't think that's the main focal point of the game. So you don't really have voiced out acted lines. You can't really hear. They're not saying the things down below. And it is pretty repetitious, pretty static after a while. There's not a lot of uniqueness to it. So before he says what he thinks, I think that's fine. I think that's totally fine. I think the better comparison will be between Starfield and Cyberpunk because they're more in the same vein of real conversations with real voice actors and lines and everything like that. So
okay, there we are. Hello there, buddy. Request dialogue help. An aggression symbol. We've got combat there. Okay, cool, yeah. So there you go, people. It's very simple interactions inside of No Man's Sky. There's not much facial expressions going on, but at least they're aliens on alien worlds inside of a space game, aren't they? Now I'm going to move on to a Starfield, and here we go. I'm in a space game inside of some sort of spacey area on planet Jemison. But anyway, let's hit play here, because here's an interaction on this game.
I think the first thing I want to react to is Steve's hat, with just a little bit of jealousy that I wish I could pull off a hat like that. So I've just a little jealousy on the hat front. And his character's got a hat on too. That's funny.
Hello, mate.
Ah, you must be our new applicant. I'm Proctor Samuelson. The simulator's already been prepped. You can head in whenever you're ready.
Okay, yeah, cool.
While I can't answer that question directly, I will say this. Due to the solitary nature of our work, resourcefulness is a critical tool in any Vanguard pilot's repertoire.
Okay.
You're permitted, even encouraged, to use whatever tool you're able to find in there.
I really like that he started with Starfield before going to Cyberpunk, because I'm coming from Cyberpunk and I already see just a lot, just so dated. It does not. I don't think this feels like a good NPC interaction for a game in 2023. This feels very, very much harkening back to an older style game where the interactions are very animatronic. The voice is fine, the guy voice acting fine, but even the guy reading is reading in a more like almost mannequin-esque animatronic way. It doesn't feel organic. Now, the number of voice lines in Starfield I think makes that very difficult. I don't expect the facial animations to be spectacular, but just the movement in general, even the graphical fidelity, I think is playing a role here. I'm just going to quickly pause. I'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the music Steve had playing was not copyrighted music, so I just double-checked his video. His video is monetized, so I think we're good. I was like, I'm going to make this whole video and then not be able to upload it, but I sent him a DM just in case. But as far as I can tell, that the music is good to go.
Okay. Well, that's a little bit of a hint,
Good
isn't
hunting.
it? Okay, now... Okay, I find the facial expressions are rather limited, but the actual voice wasn't too bad. It sounded a little bit robotic. It doesn't sound like there was too much inflection in the voice, and you find that throughout a lot of the characters inside of Starfield. They're very sort of monotone. There's not much facial expression. They don't really move around inside of the scene either, and nor do you. It's very static, straight there, bang. Anyway, let's jump on over to Cyberpunk, because Cyberpunk's been out for...
I want to respond to that just quickly. I got in a big debate with people about this when they were comparing the NPCs and the facial animations in Starfield to Horizon Forbidden West. And I said that I didn't feel that was a fair comparison because the quantity of voice lines in Starfield necessitates such a large amount of automation. And what I mean is they can't go in and individually animate all of these instances, all of these conversations. Like this guy that he just spoke to in the game, they can't go in and animate his face individually for each of those lines because there's things that you may or may not say. There's millions of permutations for how these conversations go. So what they do is they automate it. They have the face moving and responding to the audio in an automated way. And that does lower the quality quite a bit. And I think that's why people who are fans of Bethesda games, they tend to say that. It's like, well, I'm okay with this. It's a Bethesda game after all. There's hundreds of thousands of interactions I'm going to be able to have because of the work that they've put in. So I think that would be fair pushback maybe here. I don't think Captain Steve is being that critical, but if you were to be, harshly critical of what we just saw, that would be my pushback, is that it's okay to use automation to achieve the goals of the game if the goals of the game is to have this many potential interactions. But I do think what you're about to see in Cyberpunk is going to make it feel as though maybe Starfield could be better, especially in light of what we've already seen from some of the modding community, just making the NPCs look better, look more realistic with the lighting and textures and skin and all of that. So you're going to look at Cyberpunk and you're going to have similar feelings that I do, that it looks like a more
time now, and I've been enjoying.
Looks like a more modern game. It looks like a more modern game.
Phantom Liberty sort of expansion, but let's just hit play on this now. She's crouched for a start. I don't think I've spoke to anybody that's actually crouched or done anything, but anyway, I'll hit play on this one.
Took a big hit, broke down, racing heart, cold sweat. It'll pass.
Sure hope so. But then the whole scene moves. Look, quite kind. I don't like the other options.
Fucking hope so.
Now, somebody might push back on his use of this scene and say, hey, this is a more cinematic interaction, and the Starfield interaction was just like a a side character. Like, this is a main character, main NPC, cinematically driven interaction. I think that would be a little bit fair to say, but I also think the other fair pushback, like if I'm Captain Steve, I'd push back and say, hey, a ton of the interactions in Phantom Liberty are like this. The characters are moving around. I literally talked to Idris Elba. Like, when you first meet him, he's like behind you. You don't even look at him. And then the next time you really do something with him, you go into like a bar and he's sitting next to you and the bartender's moving around. It's an entire scene and they're moving around. They're doing different things. And I think that, so if anybody were to push back on him using this scene, I would say, well, now hang on a minute. There are plenty of scenes in Cyberpunk where people are moving around and it's more dynamic. He is using one of the more extreme cases because this is like the cinematic, NPC interaction that kind of kicks off Phantom Liberty.
I know about the bomb ticking in your head. If I could disarm it now, I would in a heartbeat. You'll feel better any second now.
Maybe something stinks here.
Now, I'm just going to skip. I'm going to go full screen, and I'm going to skip something here because I don't want you guys to get any story spoilers. There were no spoilers right there, and I'm just skipping something.
It's
That's
above
here
you.
for now.
Thank you,
He
Martha.
hears you fine. Just can't talk back.
Okay. Touch songbird. You like a construct. Yeah, okay, yeah, let's do that. Look, I go to actually interact with them now. After a choice, there's actually an interaction,
I'm a netrunner. Off on the road.
And again, I think it would be fair to push back here and say he's using a mainline cinematic interaction where that's happening. So you'd have to go to a mainline interaction in Starfield. Now, I have, and with the exception of maybe being handed a watch, I don't know if there has been that much in the game where that kind of thing happens. Using sort of a side NPC interaction, when you get to Dogtown in this DLC, you can go up to NPCs and talk to them, and you don't have that level of interaction. But they do move around. Like, I went up to a guy to buy some guns, and he was like walking back and forth and ranting and raving about himself. It was like a fully animated, fully like mo-capped scene, and it was just a guy, it was just an NPC in a village, a town selling guns. So I still think what he's doing is a fair comparison because, again, you don't get this level in Starfield like at all.
Alice cognitive protocol to dial in. I see and hear what you do.
Okay, so I think he kind of gets the idea with all of that. Now, for me, I kind of feel that the NPCs inside of Starfield are less human than the humans that are cyborgs inside of Cyberpunk. I kind of think that the Starfield NPCs look a little bit like this.
I'm Sophia from Hanson Robotics.
Meet Sophia. You may have seen her around. She's one
It's
of the
so
most...
it's so true. Like, I know he's like kind of having a go here. Like, he's being funny. But I think that this is true. I think I think it's funny to point out that this is the type of faces that you're seeing in Starfield and the way that they're moving. Now, somebody would say, well, it's a stylistic choice, right? Or it's an art direction choice. I don't know if that's fair pushback because I feel like both games, both Cyberpunk and Starfield, are attempting to make people look like people in the real world, like the plants and the planets and everything. They're going for realism. So if anybody were to try to argue that, like, oh, it's an art style thing, I don't know if I would accept that. I especially considering one of the mods already out for Starfield has significantly improved what the NPCs look like. I feel that Starfield is very unpolished in a lot of ways, and I think that's the scope of the project. I think at some level, there were things that happened during production. I don't know if we'll ever find out about those things, but that's just my gut feeling and my inclination is that there was some things along the way that they really lost production time too, and that's why I think some aspects of the game just don't feel as polished.
It's freaking Sarah, isn't it, from friggin' Starfield, mate? And, they're supposed to be humans, whereas inside of Cyberpunk, you're cyborgs, you're androids, essentially, but they look more human and more believable.
Well, you're not cyborgs or androids. You're augmented humans. You have that's kind of the point. Some of the worldview baked into Cyberpunk is that human human augmentation, like augmenting our bodies, has gotten so extreme. We can put like chips in our brains and put different eyeballs in our heads. So we're more of a hybrid, but his point's still fair, is that we should almost feel and look more animatronic, more android, more cyborg-esque in Cyberpunk compared to Starfield.
Than those that are inside of Starfield. And Cyberpunk, technically, in a roundabout way, is an older game. I know that they started Starfield years ago, but they started Cyberpunk years ago. I just kind of feel that the engine that's been used for Starfield is a little bit tired, a little bit old, and probably done the NPCs a little bit of an injustice, people. As much as I'm loving the frickin' story, it would have been far more engrossing if they put a little bit more effort into the scenes, into the actual drawing the characters in, and a little bit more immersion, a little bit like what we just saw inside of, Cyberpunk. I mean, that's...
I just want to point out, during this scene, when I was streaming this, I've actually streamed this portion of the game, somebody pointed out the background looked real, and it does. They're doing something in this game. Now, I don't know if it's always been this pretty. I don't know if it's always looked this good. But on my PS5, I'm not playing on some PC rig with the 40 series card or something with everything turned up to the highest settings. I'm playing on a PlayStation 5. And I have been in multiple scenes where, because of this scene, and somebody pointed it out in my stream, I'm always looking at the backgrounds now. And I have been struck by just how great the game looks in the background. The guys from Digital Foundry are saying they think this is one of the best looking games in the market right now. And to his point about, well, Cyberpunk came out and, Starfield just came out, I don't get why people think he's not saying this, but there are people that are saying that as almost like a defense. They're like, well, they've been fixing Cyberpunk for 3 years. Okay. I mean, Bethesda is, I think, a bigger company than CD Projekt Red, and they have been working on their game for a really long time. That's not really an excuse. Like, that almost presupposes that a game, when it comes out, shouldn't be expected to look as good or be as good as a game that's been fixing itself and working on itself. Like, would we accept that excuse for Diablo 4 failing to have good systems in place and it's failed to maintain a live service audience? Well, you would never say, well, it just came out. It's not fair to compare it to, let's say Destiny or something, a game that's been working on itself and working on the format for years. You would never defend Diablo. You would say, it's Blizzard. You have a huge budget. You have tons of people. You should have been able to make a great game. You shouldn't be compared to a game that's 3 years old that has worked on itself for sure, but a lot of what Cyberpunk's been doing has been quality of life improvements, bug squashing, not making the NPCs in the game prettier. I think at its core, Cyberpunk is a better game. You could probably even go back to vanilla Cyberpunk and play some of these interactions, and they would look quite good in comparison to Starfield. Now, obviously, if you play Cyberpunk on an old-gen system, which it shouldn't have launched there to begin with, that's where most of the problems were. It launched on PC and had like a 75% rating on Steam, because I think people really enjoyed it.
This was probably the best sort of pull into a game that I've had in a long time. And they could have so easily have done that, or I feel that they could have with Starfield perhaps. But, this is the first Bethesda game that I've really jumped into and started to enjoy. But there we go. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, people.
Well, I want to go back to what I just said. Cyberpunk had like a 75% on Steam because it wasn't a great game. Like, people were enjoying it, but it was in a pretty rough state. And Starfield currently has that score on Steam. So if anybody wants to argue and say, well, Cyberpunk was terrible when it came out and it was such a bad game, you have to remember that it was really in the worst state on old-gen consoles, and PC audience tended to enjoy it a little bit more because it wasn't as bad on PC. And again, it had like a 75%, which is the current score for Starfield right now on Steam. Anyway, if you go globally, it drops because of the lack of language support. I don't think that's necessarily fair. That's not a judgment of the game's quality itself. So I keep saying it's basically a 75%. So what that means is, as bad as Cyberpunk when it launched at 75% on Steam, and the acclaim and the reviews it's getting everywhere else, Cyberpunk had the same score on PC. So you're basically, if you're going to argue that Cyberpunk was so terrible when it came out, well, then so is Starfield, according to the audience. Which is where I say you can have a 2.0 moment. You can turn things around, right? And he says, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about. I think this is subjective, and I think what he's saying is something a lot of people are saying. I don't think Captain Steve's out of line here. I think this is on target.
Let us know in the comments. Yes, sound off, people. Heck yes. Anyways, back to me over in the old studio. So yeah, I am loving... I like all three of these games. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to hate on it or anything like that. I'm just saying that Starfield's NPCs, in my opinion, are better than those inside of No Man's Sky. Actually, I think I've got a little PowerPoint. I've got a little PowerPoint I can do for you people.
I'm going to skip ahead to his PowerPoint. If you guys want to watch the whole video, I'm not going to give you the whole video. I like to do reaction content very, very sparingly, and I do not want to be a replacement for the video. So what he does during this segment is he asks about if they fit in the game, are they voice acted well, do they have lifelike expressions, do they have unique gestures, and are they memorable? And so what he does is he goes through each, and I'm just going to skip through No Man's Sky and let him get to Starfield, because again, I'm more concerned with the Starfield versus Cyberpunk comparison. I'm probably going to end the reaction video after this section, because he talks quite a bit more after that. So again, if you want the full video, I'm not a replacement for that. You got to go watch his full video. Go show him support, and ask him why he's still using Winamp as well when you go over there.
No, because they look like freaking Sophia the android that I just showed you momentarily ago. Have they got unique gestures? Yeah, maybe. A few of them have. Yes. Yeah, I guess. It's like the fan. Yeah, he's got a few. Are they memorable? The adoring fan is. A couple of them are. So, there you go. Anyway, I've hit it up. They got 2 greens. I mean, the unique gestures, perhaps I'm being a little bit unfair on that one, but I have seen a few repeated gestures. They all seem to have the same sort of walking frame. It's like in Cyberpunk. Sometimes you see NPCs walking with a limp, and they're all different body shapes and all sorts of... You don't see as much variety inside of the old Starfield, just out on the streets and crowded markets or whatever. You don't see the same variety that you see inside of Cyberpunk.
I would agree with this, especially when you go to the city Neon in Starfield. If you compare that city to any of the cities or populated locations in Cyberpunk, it's night and day. Cyberpunk is really, really good. We didn't get all of his discussion here, but you can see what he decided. You can see his conclusions. Do they fit the game? He's saying no. He's thinking they're too animatronic for like a realistic game. But then, are they voice acted? Yes. I would even add here a qualifier. Are they voice acted well? I believe that the voice acting in Starfield is actually the most impressive part of the NPCs, is that the voice acting is so good for such a big game. I think that's why their lack of lifelike expressions, their lack of unique gestures, they just sort of stand there. I think that sadly sells a lot of the voice acting short. You know, it's interesting, the good voice acting almost magnifies the fact that the NPCs are kind of dated looking, because the quality of voice acting that we're getting these days is so much better and more consistent than we used to, especially for a game with a big budget. They tend to get better voice actors. So if they were voice acted poorly, you might not notice it much. You might just be like, yeah, it's fine. The NPCs are just sort of furniture. They're just decoration. They're just kind of there to talk to, and then I'm going to move on. But the fact that they sound like real people, they're real actors, you know, doing actual voice acting, not just reading lines, I actually think that is one of the reasons why it's a little bit more noticeable, especially when you go and play Cyberpunk. I mean, you're playing with actual people that you recognize their voices, with Keanu Reeves and Idris Elba.
Yeah, anyway, let's set up Cyberpunk. So we go. Do they fit the game? All across the board are freaking green. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Starfield is far better than No Man's Sky, but at the same time, it would be nice to see some aliens inside of Starfield. In fact, it would just be nice to see Starfield up their game a bit with the NPCs. I'm hoping perhaps they might bring out some sort of DLC or some sort of expansion pack that brings in alien races. You know, it's like the Sol system. They could put an elliptical planet on an orbit. They could bring in Planet X, Planet Nibiru, bring in some reptilians. Yes, lizard people. Yeah, that'll make the Y files very happy. If you haven't checked out the WoW files, they're freaking awesome. Yeah, go and hit them up. Anyway, so there we go, people. That's my sort of synopsis on this. I've done a PowerPoint. Yes, don't say I didn't spend some time on this. Yeah, there we go, people.
I like Captain Steve. If you want to see the rest of his video, make sure and check out his channel. I thought his PowerPoint section was good, because he's essentially saying, if you look at NPCs in a game and you want them to sort of be fitting, they need to fit the aesthetic, they need to look like the art style that the game is going for. You know, are they voice acted? Do they have lifelike expressions? unique gestures, and are they memorable? It's funny that, like, as I watched this is the second time I've watched this. As I've watched this, it just, I'm struck by how correct he is. Like, when I'm playing through Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty and doing the NPC interactions, I traditionally and typically in my own gaming experience have not liked those types of things, but Cyberpunk sort of helps by having things move around. Maybe somebody will be sitting, standing, maybe they'll get up. Maybe they'll walk back and forth. Maybe you'll sit down. Maybe you'll stand up. All this happens sort of in between. I just went and accepted a side gig with somebody, and they had me sit down, and then he repositioned and sat on a table across from me, and the person that he was sort of, working with was behind him, and she'd say stuff and get up and move around and get irritated. It was very, very involved. And I think that's the evolution of NPC interactions that Cyberpunk has done so well. As it launched, as it had a rough launch, as it failed to meet expectations, all those criticisms are fair. But I also think it's fair to praise the game for taking things forward. I really do think one of the best criticisms of Starfield is they just very much played it safe. There's just not a lot of that innovation that you would expect. The inventory system, the way you load guns and transfer guns and have to pick guns up and drop guns on the ground, the ammo economy working the same way it did in Fallout 4, and the fact that all the NPC interactions are exactly as they were in those older games where you go, they stand, you stand, and you're like standing face to face, talking for a little bit, picking options, and then leaving. I think when they first started doing that, it was amazing. It was like, wow, you're taking the RPG mechanic of a conversation, which in the past would have been, in really, really old games, like a box of text below with the person's image above what they were saying. Like in classic games, it like puts their face in a square and then a block of text, and then your face is in another square with your block of text. Well, we've come a really long way. And I just feel that Starfield didn't go any further than what they had done in the past. And it's fair, and I think in good to point and say, look, CD Projekt Red did really, really good stuff with this, with Cyberpunk. They made it a lot more dynamic. They made it a lot more involved and living. And I think that's a huge, huge deal for a game that you're trying to get immersed into. So be sure to support Captain Steve. Go sub to his channel. Go check out the full video. And as always, these roll over into a debrief. So I do a live show every day and then an upload every day. But then I kind of discuss the upload with my members. You can click join to become a member. If you can't do a membership, that's totally fine. It supports the channel if you hit subscribe and the bell button. That way I can see you in the next video.